The Mizo, like the Naga, the Kuki, are ethnic communities. Ethnic communities. They are not tribe as such. Tribe with one distinct language, one clear community, language community. So these are group of tribes. Currently, the word Mizo refers to this group of tribes living in Mizoram, or most of the tribes in Mizoram. But otherwise, the related groups were spread across Mizoram, Manipur, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. So, example, they speak Kuki Chin languages. It is the British policy that divided them across nations. They live on Lushai Hills in India, Chin Hills in Myanmar, Chittagong Hills in Bangladesh. According to Reverend Leong Khaya, the Mizo historian, the Mizo migrated from China around 750 AD. So in a way, not very distant, and stayed in Myanmar. They began moving towards Mizoram only in 16th century, and they completed migration by 18th century. So what does it mean? In 8th century, they were in Myanmar. 16th century, they were in Mizoram, and migration is not completed. They completed it only by 18th century. And suppose some other people were living nearby around that time, 17th century, 18th century, or after that. So sometimes this leads to contest over who is an earlier settler, who is indigenous. One example being Naga-Kuki conflict. In fact, Mizos are Kukis. It's the same group. Though they are not being called, they may not be called now. So these tribes in Mizoram did not have one common language, but they made one particular particular language, Mizo Tawang, as official language is spoken, which belongs to Tibeto-Burman family. But otherwise, English is widely used. English could be widely used because they became Christianized. 98% of them became Christians, and literacy rate is also very high. In 2011, it is 90%. Okay. So that's about Mizo people. But there is one very important development in the context of Mizoram, which shows something about the way Indian state works. Mizoram is held as a model for peace, held as a peace model, because it gave a lot of trouble from 1966 to 86. It gave a lot of trouble. And in 86, an accord is signed, and after that, almost no violence, peaceful state. So, which is very rare in northeastern history. In fact, some people say this is the most successful, or probably the only success. I think the only successful peace deal in Northeast India. So it is of interest to know how it happened, because it can be held as a model for others to follow. Okay. How it happened. It was first part of Assam. In fact, it became, this is the history. Mizos were incorporated to the British rule in 1870. And this particular district, Lusha Hills district, created in 1952. But this thing was, these hills were being treated as an excluded area by the British. So as a part of Assam. But one important event took place in 1959. There was a famine due to what is called mautam. Mautam means bamboo flowering. This is a peculiar development to Mizoram. When the bamboo flowers, it seems millions of rats are born and destroying agriculture, leading to famine. And this comes almost every 48 years. And Mizos were expecting, but neither the state government nor the central government took it seriously. In fact, Government of India thought it was a kind of tribal superstition. But then it happened. Then famine was devastating. And it was at that time in Mizo National Famine Front was created for relief work. And it won the hearts and minds of people. And it became a political party of Mizo National Front in 1961. And Mizo National Front wanted two things, which NSC and IM also wants now. One, Greater Mizoram. Next is one demand, secessionism. Okay. So Greater Mizoram, because Mizos are spread across Indian states, and also they are across Indian states, and also they want Greater Mizoram. But probably the difference between Mizo demand then and Naga demand now, or even few decades earlier, was that Mizos felt, or Laldenga felt, that independence was a real possibility. I mean, that is my understanding. in going by the things they did. In 1966, on March 1st, Mizo National Army, which is an armed wing of MNF, declares independence from India on a specific date. And then it attacks security posts, captures them in those hills area, and security forces there were fighting back. An Indian army involved, and for the first time, Indian Air Force used aerial bombings on 5th and 6th of March. There are two features. Aerial bombing. This is one. And then it went on for a long time. And one more thing that Government of India did was village groupings. The government wanted to settle all the villages near the road. So villages were going to be regrouped, resettled, which affected 80% of the population, which involved a lot of coercion and force, a lot of coercion. And so it was a very serious effort. In one event which took place years later, an entire top brass of police sitting at one place was killed. So it was a very violent thing, and Government of India responded with ferocity. AFSPA was imposed. So lot of violence both by the MNF and on the government, by the government. Okay. Then something happened that in 1986 an accord was signed. Of course, there were many developments before that. This accord was signed by Rajiv Gandhi, but a lot of work was done during the Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi. And the contents of the accord are this. This was signed on June 30th, 1986. The Mizo National Front, its leader Laldenga. Till date, this particular day is celebrated as Peace Day, Remnani. And rebels were supposed to surrender arms, and the government would rehabilitate them. And Mizoram, at one time, is Union territory. It was made Union territory in 1972, would become a state. And MNF would conform to the constitution. Economic package was offered. It was made a special category, says state in a university, and it will develop a dialect as an official language. And border trade with countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar would be legalized, and inner line regulation would remain in force that would restrict the entry of others. And compensation to the families still were promised. And it was the Congress government ruling. Congress government resigned, elections were held, and MNF came to power, and Laldenga became the chief minister. And after that, it was peace. So, and almost there was no violence. So maybe this also a template in terms of increased political autonomy and power to the rebel leader, and surrender and rehabilitation. So these are the aspects of the deal. But why should this be successful and where many other peace deals did not? There is no complete answer. But one point that Shekhar Gupta of the print channel says that this represents bell curve of insurgency. Bell curve means people start increases, huge peak, and then it falls. And around this time, a peace deal is signed. So the steam is off. People are prone to peace deal, and peace deal is signed. If you want to sign a peace deal when it is here, no, it is not possible. Or here it is not possible. People should be tired and sick. Okay. So he thinks that by 1986, it reached the end of the curve. Okay. That's definitely one interesting way of looking at it. Because people don't fight endlessly. That's true. But my explanation is that, which I think others should examine, is that Laldenga and others really had very high expectations on the outcome. It was not like generally giving trouble, harassment of the government, but they did seem to believe that they would indeed become independent. So it may surprise us now, but that seemed to be the belief. So volunteers were raised across the states, states of Northeast India, and they seem to have believed that they would get a separate nation, and they hugely underestimated Indian Army's response. MNF activists say that Indian Army treated people as enemies. Okay. So brutal. Okay. So because they gave their best, believed that it was possible, so they were disappointed and realized that independent Mizoram is impossible, and better surrender, better come to terms politically. I think people also were tired by the time. Around 3,000 people died fighting. And church was involved in brokering the peace deal. Okay. So maybe if you are genuine in thinking that you will get independence, and then you will realize that it is not possible, you are likely to change. But if you are interested only in harassing, giving trouble, and in that process create a position of influence and power for yourself, maintaining your own army, collecting your own taxes, then it may go on indefinitely or for many more years. So surely we need to examine why Mizoram was successful where other states were not so. So this is how a movement called MNF movement came to an end. This is another example of ethno-nationalism. And this ethno-nationalism is also a reaction to Assamese ethno-nationalism. Assamese wanted to impose the Assamese language, which was hurtful to Mizos. So Naga nationalism, Mizo nationalism, Assamese nationalism, these are all various types of ethno-nationalism in Northeast India.